No matter how badly you want to reach your goals, if your brain doesn't have enough energy, it simply won't happen. And this has nothing to do with laziness or weak willpower. The real reason is much deeper. Today's video is about brain energy. You'll learn how motivation actually works, what silently destroys your mental energy every day, how dopamine really controls your behavior, and how you can train your brain to work for you instead of against you. And if you're someone who has tried many times to quit a bad habit but failed, just like I did, by the end of this video, you'll realize that those failures might have been far more useful for your brain than you ever imagined. Let's begin. Dopamine is often called the motivation hormone. And when we talk about brain energy, what we're really talking about is dopamine. Dopamine is what gives us the drive to move, to act, to chase something. Every animal has it. Birds, fish, insects, even the simplest organisms. Dopamine is what gives living beings the motivation to find food, find a partner, and escape danger. Without it, survival would be impossible. There's a famous experiment that shows this very clearly. Scientists reduced dopamine activity in mice and then placed food directly in front of them. The mice still enjoyed eating the food when it was right there. But when the food was moved just a few inches away, the mice didn't move at all. Not because they didn't want the food, but because they had no motivation to go get it. Eventually, they starved. This is extremely important to understand. Even if a goal is pleasurable, meaningful, or important, without enough dopamine, you simply won't pursue it. That's why wanting something and being motivated are not the same thing. The popular phrase, "if you really want it, you'll achieve it," sounds nice, but it's incomplete. Desire alone is not enough. Your brain also needs sufficient dopamine to support action. At this point, the obvious question is, how do we increase dopamine? And yes, I will explain natural and healthy ways to support dopamine later in the video. But before that, we need to understand how the dopamine system actually works. Because once you understand it, you may realize that constantly trying to increase dopamine is not the solution. Each of us has a baseline level of dopamine in the brain. Some people naturally have higher baseline levels. You've probably met very energetic individuals, while others have lower levels. This is influenced by genetics and early life experiences. Whenever we want something, even something small, like ordering food, hugging someone, or checking a message, dopamine levels rise. They peak at the moment we receive the reward. But here's the key part. Immediately after the reward, dopamine doesn't return to baseline. It drops below it. The bigger the spike, the deeper the drop afterward. And it takes time for dopamine levels to recover back to normal. Think of it like money. The more you spend at once, the less you have left until new income arrives. This is why after achieving a big goal, something you worked toward for a long time, people often feel a strange emptiness afterward. That feeling isn't random. It's the brain temporarily operating with reduced dopamine. So the natural question becomes, can we just add more dopamine from the outside to avoid this crash? Technically, yes. But this is where the real problem begins. Here's the paradox. The more dopamine you constantly give your brain, the less dopamine you end up having over time. Dopamine is produced by specific neurons and released into the space between brain cells. To have an effect, it must bind to dopamine receptors on other neurons. These receptors are like doors. Dopamine needs those doors to be open in order to do its job. Dopamine levels are repeatedly pushed very high. The brain interprets this as something abnormal. To protect balance, it responds by reducing the number of receptors. In simple terms, the doors start closing. When fewer receptors are available, dopamine has nowhere to go. It gets reabsorbed or broken down. So even if dopamine is being produced, it becomes less effective. Over time, the entire dopamine system weakens. This is not a punishment by nature. It's a survival mechanism. The body is designed to return to balance. If body temperature rises, it cools you down. If your heart rate increases too much, it slows it down. The same principle applies to dopamine. Now the question is, what causes these unhealthy dopamine spikes? Things like gambling, drugs, highly processed food, pornography, endless scrolling on social media, and certain types of games. These are all activities humans created that produce very high dopamine spikes with very little effort. And anything that creates such strong dopamine responses carries a risk of dependency. When dopamine levels rise and crash repeatedly, the system gradually becomes damaged. Over time, more and more stimulation is needed just to feel normal. But here's something even more interesting and more uncomfortable. Even things our culture celebrates can damage the dopamine system if handled incorrectly. Constant rewards, constant praise, nonstop success, winning at all costs. If you become focused only on outcomes, your dopamine spikes only when you reach the goal. The rest of the time, your baseline stays low. This creates a cycle where you're always chasing the next achievement just to feel okay. A fascinating experiment demonstrated this in children. Researchers observed kids who loved drawing. They divided them into two groups. One group was told they would receive a reward for every drawing, a star, a toy, some form of praise. The other group received no rewards at all. Over time, the children who expected rewards started drawing less and less. Eventually, they stopped enjoying it altogether. Meanwhile, the children who received no external rewards continued drawing with the same enthusiasm as before. This showed something critical. External rewards can actually kill intrinsic motivation. When the brain learns to associate effort only with rewards, the process itself becomes unpleasant. The brain wants the dopamine now, not the journey. So what's the solution? Should we stop having goals or rewards entirely? Of course not. The real solution is to rewire the motivation system so that dopamine is released during the process, not only at the outcome. And this is absolutely possible. Another well-known experiment showed this clearly. Children were divided into two groups and given similar tasks. One group was praised with identity-based praise. You're smart, you're talented. The other group was praised for effort. You tried hard. You focused. You didn't give up. The first group performed worse over time. When tasks became harder, they gave up quickly. They were afraid of losing their identity as smart. The second group continued working and achieved higher results. Even more interesting, when asked to report their scores publicly, the first group often exaggerated or lied, while the effort praise group reported honestly. This showed that praising effort builds resilience, honesty, and long-term motivation. And today we must become our own parents in this sense. When you're doing something difficult and you feel resistance, acknowledge it. Tell yourself, this is hard and I'm doing it anyway. This is my fourth day trying. Good job. Over time, your brain learns to associate effort itself with reward. Dopamine begins to release during the attempt, not just the result. But there's one more critical rule for this to work. Dopamine detox. Before starting a new habit that feels difficult, avoid high dopamine activities for about 30 minutes beforehand and afterward. No scrolling, no movies, no instant gratification. Why? Because if dopamine spikes right before or after the habit, the brain compares the two and labels the habit as unpleasant. This short detox helps preserve dopamine so the effort itself feels more rewarding. Longer dopamine detoxes can be even more powerful. Choosing one high dopamine activity, like social media, junk food, or endless entertainment, and avoiding it for 2 weeks or a month can dramatically reset your system, as long as there is no serious dependency involved. During this time, small activities regain their pleasure. Focus improves, motivation stabilizes. And here's the perspective shift. Every time you tried to quit a bad habit and failed, those periods without the habit were not wasted. They were detox periods for your brain. They helped heal your dopamine system. Instead of seeing those attempts as failures, see them as progress. Let's turn this into a challenge. Choose one activity you enjoy the most and give it up for 2 weeks. Just one. For me, it's scrolling on TikTok. Whenever I feel stressed, I grab my phone and scroll. For the next 2 weeks, I'm stopping. Write in the comments what you'll give up. Finally, let's talk about healthy ways to support dopamine. Morning sunlight is one of the most powerful tools. Just 10 to 20 minutes outside can significantly support dopamine levels, even on cloudy days. Chocolate and caffeine can increase dopamine as well, though it's better to delay caffeine about 40 minutes after waking. Cold exposure, like cold showers, can strongly increase dopamine for several hours afterward when done occasionally. Social connection, movement, music, nature, and physical affection also support dopamine in a balanced way. The goal is not extreme dopamine highs. The goal is stability, enjoying the process, valuing effort, letting goals be milestones, not the only source of motivation. Dopamine is powerful, but it's not the only hormone involved in well-being. Balance matters, and in future videos, we'll talk about others, like serotonin. If you believe this video deserves to be seen by more people, the simplest thing you can do is like the video and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps.